Welcome everyone. My name's Maureen Coleman. I'm the Director of Marketing at UpMetrics. We're pleased to have you today for our webinar, More Than a Game, Athletics as an Academic Intervention with Stephen Minix. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started today. The first is that we will be recording this presentation and we're happy to share that with you following the completion. And we encourage you to share it with your colleagues. This certainly is sort of a resource that we hope you'll use going forward. And the second thing is that we've opted for a more interactive experience today, allowing our participants to unmute and ask questions. At the end of the webinar, we will have a question and answer period where I will unmute all of you and you can ask questions of our presenter, Stephen. So for the first part of the presentation, we'll all be muted, but we will allow for that time, about 5 minutes at the end of the presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you there. So as I said, my name is Maureen Coleman. I'm the Director of Marketing here at UpMetrics, and we're pleased to have you today, and I'm honored to introduce our speaker, Stephen Minix, and he's gonna kick us off and tell you a little bit about himself, and we'll get started. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mo. I appreciate it. Folks, thanks for making time to come out today. I realize most of you are athletic admin that likely have zero time to do this exact thing you're taking the time to do now. The goal here is to share a little bit of my experience and the work we do here to support organizations in the effort to talk about and frame their athletic departments as academic interventions, as opposed to just financial hits on budgets. Quick background: former teacher, athletic director, school side admin, district admin over athletics and after school, CIF Los Angeles board member, CIF state AD advisory member. And I share all that to say I have my stripes a little bit in this space. And I'm really excited now to be able to provide capacity to organizations from the outside of the system now. And today, specifically what we'll be talking a little bit about kind of our approach to the work, as well as our relationship with my former employer, Green Dot Public Schools, as a case study to this work. Really excited to dig in. That said, moving to the agenda. It's always best to know where we plan on going. Really quickly, we'll talk briefly right now about the link between athletics and academics, and then move along about our day. So, the teacher in me said we should frame the conversation with some simple data to frame it out. Looking at this study here, Los Angeles Unified School District study in 2014, focusing on 35,000 student athletes. If you look on the left in blue, that is the student athletes versus the orange, the non-student athletes. Student athletes graduating at 2.8% GPA and 92% attendance rates versus 2.1 and 77%. Extrapolating that out, it's actually 21 more days of attended days of school in a school year. Can you imagine what your school staff can do with students if they attended school 21 more days? The likelihood of increased academic performance is there. Moving into another study, University of Kansas, looking at Kansas, the high school athletics across the state of Kansas, 98% graduation rate versus 90%. So what we don't talk about is causation. That would be a slippery slope. What we talk about is the correlation and relationship. And if you are able to identify data that speaks to the validity of your program being an academic intervention, then you should talk about it as such. The goal again today is to help you with that process. So why does the relationship exist? Again, realizing you guys are the choir, you understand the soft skills, resiliency, grit, perseverance, ownership, all these things that matter when student athletes participate in a quality program. But being intentional in talking about that, going beyond the eligibility thresholds your state may have, going beyond the opportunity to shine for kids to be able to show successes on the field as well in the classroom. There's just clear relationships, sense of ownership, mentorship, kids staying actively involved in programs. These are all things that play into the increased positive relationship between athletic participation and academic performance. However, you need data to prove that story. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to look at athletics beyond statistics, beyond wins and losses, beyond scoreboard, and truly talk about what we see as student athlete participation during season, off season, out of season, the whole kit, the whole time. Because if you don't, and you only look at kids' participation in the season of sport, it's a lot harder to get them to buy in to this idea, as well as the stakeholders on your school site, such as teachers, administrators, etc. So let's get beyond the scoreboard. Circling back to our agenda, now looking specifically, how do we talk about athletics as an academic intervention tool? Again, starting year-round, when you think about athletics, it is not a 4-month season. It is a year-round. Kids prep before season, after season, strength and conditioning, post-season. There's a lot of things going into it. So if we infuse the intentionality in looking at their academics and their behavior, as evidenced by out-of-school suspensions, detentions, and the such, we then can start to talk to school administration differently about the services we as athletic administrators and coaches are providing. So a simple best practice for your athletic department when looking at athletics year-round is start with hiring, right? You got to hire for the type of coach you want in your building. We understand there's not many coaches out there. There's not as many as there used to be. But the point is simple shifting your questioning to get people in the door that are interested in talking about more than just scores is a start. Kids love praise, right? So how about praising their academic performance off season? How about talking about academic honor rolls? Administrators are always mindful of those types of conversations before they're willing to talk about inventory, budgets, etc. But if we talk about this kind of support, as it relates to increased performance, what we'll see is administrators being willing to listen. That's the goal. If a kid knows he matters beyond the athletic field, and that you are going to be mindful of their performance academically throughout the year, the likelihood of them being more accountable to that is increased based on the relationship with that coach. In season, it's a little more difficult. Folks think that because kids are playing, they can just, they'll make themselves eligible. It doesn't work like that. If you take the time and put in steps up front that talk about the importance. For example, when I started coaching basketball at Locke, I used to always, once the team was made, I would have the athletes sit in their uniforms in school desks on the gym floor with the scoreboard on, with the clock on, so they understood that this is business. We do not get to the court until we get to the books. That visual was powerful, and it lasts the entire school year. Simple steps like that, and that didn't cost any money. Adding 45 minutes of study hall to practice time. You have state limitations for 2 hours oftentimes for participation, but that does not include academic enrichment. So when you're able to offer study hall, simple 45 minutes a day, what you look at is almost 4 hours a week of intentional time for kids to work on their books. Doesn't mean you as a coach have to, but the kids understand that they have a consistent opportunity to engage. That's a powerful message to send to your staff or your team. Off-season, as we begin to look at off-season, this is where a lot of folks really think they do not have the ability to intervene. This, I would argue, is the most important time. Even with a walk-on coach who probably is up on your campus talking to kids about spring ball, summer ball, etc., if they were setting up time to have kids come in and be accountable with their report cards, with their grade checks, just the simple conversation with the coach of talking about what they're up to when there's no games going on, it shows kids that, again, you're invested beyond the game. It's more than a game. It's what we're talking about here. So those types of activities can really go a long way in building that culture. I've been arguing for many years about taking coaching stipends and extending it to off-season sports season to have teachers run academic interventions. Think about the message that sends to your team if they know that no matter what, they're going to be supported in their note. That's what we're trying to do. That also helps manipulate the conversation with the administrator saying, I'm not asking you for spring league funds. I'm not asking you for more goals. I'm asking you for a tutor for my students in their off season. Automatically makes this a more relevant conversation and a lot harder to say no to, especially when you pair it with some objective data. Perfect timing to talk about data and support and how do you measure that impact. When looking at how to measure impact of your athletic program, again, beyond the scoreboard, you need to start realizing what it is that you're trying to measure. What is it? Is athletics a financial hit at your school? Is it a cultural value add? Is it a motivating factor for kids? Data will help you show that impact. Will bring legitimacy to your department in admin meetings, funder settings, etc. If you can talk about wins and losses and on the field as well as in the classroom, what you'll see is a lot more people will begin to listen and understand that this athletic department we're talking about is a little different than ones in the past. Working with admin at the site to review your goals and tracking academic data is the first step. A simple conversation with admin, because they will be the ones that help you get access to the information. It's not very difficult for them. It's likely a simple export of data from the information system at their site that then can be chewed on. It doesn't take too much bandwidth. It's a report that probably can be set up, but we need to figure out where to start, and you always should start small. In the case study that we'll be looking at in a few moments, we look specifically at average daily attendance and GPA as well as discipline infractions layered over athletic participation. That's the simple information we were looking at based on the client's interest. So when thinking about what academic data is needed to look at, or what to provide a baseline of where we're going in this reporting, you just need to start the conversation. Perhaps your organization is not interested in average daily attendance. Perhaps you're not interested in GPA. But those are two baselines that I think always provide quick purview into what's really going on in a program. Kids tend to vote with their feet. In programs that are based in ownership, kids show up to programs they value. If they don't show up, if they're not attending, there's probably a reason. When we talk about the attendance in these type of programs, specifically athletics, we refer to it oftentimes as engagement, attendance and hours spent. Some refer to it as dosage. This powerful data point, once layered over academic outcomes, GPA, growth over time, begins to tell a little bit of a story that you can start to understand. Then when you look at it over time, you see trends in in-season, out-of-season, so that you can highlight areas to interject interventions, AKA tutoring. Now, the goal is you got an idea of what you want to collect. You talk to your administration, they're interested in this pursuit you're on. Now you got to put the pieces together and tell the story. If you have the information available on a deck or a drive and it just sits there, that's all it's going to do. However, if you work with that information, put it into somewhat of a narrative, provide subjective information, anecdotes, pictures, quotes of kids, and then layer that with objective information, you now have a far more precise tool to approach stakeholders, principals, admin, school board, and speak to the importance of this athletic program on the greater mission of the school, which is likely increasing academic performance of students. It always starts with mindset, though, right? Everything's a behavior change. By simply talking to administrators about the academics first before the performance on the field, what will happen is they oftentimes will look at you as a resource to help their initiative. If they're the admin over athletics, I guarantee you there's somebody above them that's asking for reporting on this program that they administer. So if you can show that your efforts are in line with their greater efforts, you have a champion and a champion in admin. They're the ones that can get you a standing meeting at the staff meetings to be able to present out quarterly about the growth over time of student athletic performance. They're the ones that are going to help you get access to the school board meetings that you probably want to be at to present some of this information. They are key linchpin in this progress, and it starts by a conversation with them. You don't have to have it all figured out, but you have to be willing to frame what you're interested in doing so that they understand it. One or a few common mistakes are listed here. Oftentimes, again, people focus on championships instead of relevance academically. Ignoring the off-season time, talking to the wrong people, or the worst, talking to the right people at the wrong time. Going to somebody talking about ROI and budget when the budgets are already baked. Again, timing is important. All will play into your ability to change the mindsets of folks on your side. Now you have there. The next goal is to share the strategies, support academics. Show what you're doing when you present out to school staff members. Tell them the steps that have been taken. Show them the amount of study hall hours that are being instituted by your coaches. To be able to show it, you got to track it. Show the data to validate it. explain the academic growth, understand what you're trying to look at. This all goes into humanizing the work. You can't talk about data just as numbers, especially with student athletics, because it's the kids. You want to talk about the story, the people, the kids, and the data that goes along with it. It's important for folks to understand, and the easiest way to get them to understand is by humanizing that data. We'll talk a little bit at the end about how we at UpMetrics support that effort, whether in thought partnering with organizations or actually coming on board as capacity building to do that ourselves. Okay, now to the real part of this conversation. Looking at a case study, just to frame this a little bit, what you're going to see in a few moments is about 5 to 7 slides of what was a 40-slide deck looking at the impact of student athletics across Green Dot Public Schools in California for 1 calendar year. The bigger project is a 3-year project looking at longitudinal impact of these programs to inform their strategic plan of modifying the way the athletic program is administered based on data and goals collectively codified across the district. It's a huge idea, a huge ambitious project, but it started with a simple report, and that's what we're going to dive into. Again, Green Dot Public Schools is the group. I'll be very candid. This is my former employer. I was the athletic and after-school administrator at that site for many years as a department of 1, 26 schools in 3 states. It can be done. I'm just proud that I got to continue working with this project beyond my role at the organization. The holy grail for athletic administrators is multi-sport participation. We oftentimes hear that conversation framed in specialization relative to injuries. But why don't we talk about multi-sport participation relative to the positive impacts you see in kids who play multiple sports, them being at school more often, and then likely having increased academic performance. Small sample size, but if you look at the bottom band, there was 6 participants that played on 3 teams, meaning a fall, winter, and a spring sport, and their GPAs were 3.5 with a 98% attendance rate. We've seen this report, or we've seen this type of information replicated on almost every report we do for schools where kids are playing multiple sports. This helps you articulate to coaches the importance of sharing athletes beyond, again, the specialization conversation. Now looking at demographic breakdown, GPA by ethnicity. Now, as you'll see in the narrative side of this, and again, we'll share this information with you after, but we focused on the 2 races that make up most of Green Dot Public Schools, African American and Hispanic. If you look at specifically those groups, the red is the student athletes and the blue is the non-student athletes. Student athletes, African American student athletes, GPA 2.9 versus 2.4 for a non-participating student athlete across the school district. Now looking at average daily attendance by ethnicity. Again, same group of kids we're looking at, but if you look at the difference, specifically on the left side, the African American athletes, 97% attendance across the school district versus 89% attendance for non-student athletes. That is a powerful data set to look at when you're talking about ways to reach kids that the target kids that we're trying to reach. Again, not talking causation, talking correlation and relationship. Now, specifically looking at GPA and average daily attendance by gender, because the idea is if you have information ready, it can be cut a variety of ways depending on what your goals are. As we talk about Title IX equity and balance, we always want to pay attention to gender as well. Again, red student athlete, blue non-student athlete, and again, it's clear there is a positive relationship with student athletes outperforming non-student athletes relative to GPA and attendance across the school district. Now, taking, again, another 70,000-foot view at the schools in Los Angeles specific to Green Dot's athletic departments. All this is a simple snapshot so an administrator can look in at all the schools at once and see academically where the student athletes are performing against their non-student athlete peer. And it's clear. In all except for one site, student athletes outperform non-student athletes. Now, if you look closely at that second group, that there is a difference. Animal Jackie Robinson, the GPA, you're playing with house money at that point. All those GPAs at that site are above 3.0. And I would argue that most organizations will be very proud of those numbers as they stand. However, I still would like to see our athletes step up. Now, taking this same conversation down to non-student athlete versus student athlete breakdown by campus, same thing rings true. Student athletes come to school more, we know that, but now data can prove it. The goal is to get beyond the subjective and move to the objective. You must be able to prove that which you think you talk about. That's the goal. Athletics has been revered for many years, but no longer can you stand on it's important because it feels good. It has to be objectively proven, excuse me. Now getting into the real stuff, discipline infractions. We all talk about discipline infractions, and coaches have a great ability to manipulate kids' behavior during the season because you don't do what I ask, you sit on the bench. It's a powerful tool. However, if we look at suspension rates in school, out of school, discipline infractions, again, student athletes outperform non-student athletes. Very powerful data when you're talking about student athletics as an intervention, whether it be academic or behavior. This, again, is the proof points you need to be able to get folks to listen to you beyond equipment. As we started this project, we looked at the entire school district, and now, again, as I told you, this was a part of a 40-page slide deck. We begin to dive into school-specific. And so being the former AD at Locke High School, I chose them to highlight. Locke High School, just for reference, is in Watts, California, just outside of Compton, South LA. One of the lowest achieving academic institutions in the country for many years, and is showing marked gains over the last 10 years. And this is a pretty fun project to be able to analyze now. If we look at very same breakdown as the original project, this is all the teams looking at their average GPAs. Just for reference, CIF Los Angeles, the governing body of athletics here, mandates a 2.0 GPA to participate, and the lowest one at Locke team-wise is, I believe, a 2.43. So they're already above the threshold. Moving on to the next slide, looking at average daily attendance, athletes come to school far more often. If you look on the far right, that is the average non-student athlete attendance, somewhere around 89%. A significant change in the amount of time kids are in school as student athletes versus not. Here's where it gets fun. If you start to talk about ROI, return on investment, if you look at the amount of money a kid brings back to your school in the form of state reimbursements, this is specific to California, so we know not all states do it the same, but in California, at Locke, for the time looked at, it was a $62 a day rate, approximately, that a state reimburses a school for a kid being there. If you look at student athletes attending school more often, student athletes attend about 175 school days a year versus non-student athletes 163. The difference, if you extrapolate that financially, is $744 additional dollars per year per kid brought in by a student athlete based on their attendance alone. If you take that and extend it to the 86 athletes that were analyzed in this program, that would be an additional $63,984 in reimbursement alone. So when talking about athletics as a financial burden or a hit in your budget, it's easy to pivot that conversation directly to, wait, is it really? Should we look at true cost? Should we look at the reimbursement that's actually brought back in before we talk about how much it costs us to run the program? And then when you pair the academic information alongside of that, you begin to see why folks at the admin level will be forced to have a little bit more pointed conversation with you about the program that you're administering. Now, this again was based on the interests of Green Dot, and we helped them in this journey. As with any client, we would focus on their interests, what they're trying to do, and then put our efforts to support them in that endeavor. So it's a very quick sprint through question and answers. Through a case study. The goal was to just share kind of a little bit to frame the conversation. Does anything in here look at life-altering, how you can do this immediately next step? Not essentially, but there are resources that can help. We specifically are helping organizations across the country do this work. We do it in a variety of ways. We talk about our baseline service that we give away for free, UpActive, which actually is the app that tracks participation at the team level, that allows coaches to communicate, manage attendance, communicate frontline. That information rolls over into UpMetrics, which is a data visualization platform, which allows you to begin to cut this information by gender, by demographic, by race and ethnicity, buy free and reduce lunch rate. That information itself is powerful. Oftentimes clients take that info, work with their team to report out. However, when organizations struggle with that as well, we then potentially come in and provide them support in that area. So if you have the information and you haven't done anything with it, we'd love to talk to you about what can be done. If you have the information and you've already done something with it and you want some eyes on it, we'd love to talk to you about what can be done. The goal is we think there's ways that we can support you. We think there's ways that we can help you think through this process. And today was just an opportunity to share out some of that work and hopefully get the conversation going at your side. Now passing back to Maureen Coleman here to facilitate the next portion of this.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks everyone for being fantastic participants. I do want to give everyone a chance to ask Stephen questions now. So I'm going to unmute all of you, and we'll see how this works. Feel free to jump in and ask questions as they come to you.
Yeah, those first 3 minutes watching down here, I'm thinking we can't get away from any one of them.
You ever want to step in?
I have a question to sort of get us started, and my question is for Stephen. You know, assuming I'm an athletic director and I want to do this right away, what's my first step? What's my next step with my administrator to get started?
Good question. I think, truthfully, the first step is a discussion with your administrator of what you're trying to do. By simply talking to them about your goal to look at athletics intentionally as opposed to the academic portion of it, you need them to oftentimes, they're the gatekeepers for the academic data and information. So by talking to them about what you're trying to do, sharing with them some of the conversation, sharing with them, talking about what you're steps about, what you're interested in, that will begin to facilitate. Another easy answer is drop me an email and we'll talk about it. That's the simple conversation. But it always starts with getting that champion on your school site. Interested in the conversation.
Thanks, Stephen. Any of our attendees would like to ask a question?
He said he's a pretty good center fielder and hits a little bit. So
I haven't seen him play enough. I know that's his first sport.
Okay, great. Well, I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. It's now 11:30. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing your expertise with all of us. And if you want to learn more about UpMetrics, the website is there, or feel free to reach out to support at UpMetrics.com. Thanks again, and hope to talk with all of you soon. Take care.
Thank you.